Hello again, everyone. Continuing with New York weeks. I am looking at the Jets today of the NFL. Talked about the Giants yesterday, so I'm going to look at the other NFL team in New York, the Jets, today. The Jets have an interesting situation with quarterback. Like I've said in the past, successful teams have elite quarterbacks and guys that can control a team, control the offense, control the pace of a game, and that's why teams who win the Super Bowl have top 5 quarterbacks in the league. The Jets don't, in my opinion, even have a top 10, not even a top 15 quarterback in this league. Geno Smith's obviously going to be injured for the first maybe 2-3 weeks of the season after that little incident within the team during practice. Now that player that obviously punched him has been released from the team. I think he might have gone and signed with the Bills, but Geno Smith is still going to miss probably maybe the first 2-3 games of the season. And even when he does come back, I don't think he's the answer at quarterback for this team. When you look at him last year, he had 2,525 passing yards, but 13 touchdowns and 13 picks. Those are not numbers that are going to get the job done. He also had 28 sacks, which is an okay number. He played in 14 games, so if you look at that, about 2 sacks a game. Again, if you can get that down to around 20, I think that would be better for Geno Smith. Give him more time to find the best receiving option, go through his reads, not feel he has to get the ball out within one Mississippi, which is a ridiculous pace to try to get that ball out. You can't be giving him 7, 8 Mississippi. That's just be ridiculous. But you got to give him at least 3 for him to go through all of his reads, find the option, and let a play develop. And even if that does happen, I'm still not quite sure he's going to be that quarterback that can take the Jets to the playoffs and get them over the hump. So Ryan Fitzpatrick, they brought him in, played with the Texans last year, had great seasons with the Bills. Last year with the Texans, solid numbers with the Texans last year, just under 2,500 passing yards, 17 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, and 21 sacks. So again, maybe he is the better option. Depending on how he plays in the first 2 to 3 weeks, I don't think when Geno comes back, he's just going to get that starting job. If Ryan Fitzpatrick can find a way to take them to a 2-1 start or even maybe a 3-0 start, I think Geno Smith kind of will need to earn that job back. I think Fitzpatrick's going to have to play poorly for Geno Smith to get that starting job. That's just my thoughts on their quarterback position. When you look at the running back position, Chris Ivory, I think, is a very solid running back. I liked him when he played for the Saints. Last year, he had 198 rushing attempts for 821 yards. So I think, given the opportunity, if you give this guy 250 rushing attempts, if you hand him the ball, 10 to more than 15 times a game, that'll still get him close to that 250 rushing attempts, and I think he can be a 1,000-yard rusher with that many ball carries. I definitely think he can do that. You also have Powell, who had 33 rushing attempts for just over 140 yards this past year. You brought in Daryl Richardson, who played with St. Louis back in 2013. His numbers with them, he had 69 rushing attempts for 215 yards. And then I think your number 2 running back is Zach Stacy, who with St. Louis last year had 76 rushing attempts for 293 yards. So I do think at the running back position, it's going to be Chris Ivory getting 85% of the touches, Zach Stacy maybe getting 5 touches a game, Chris Ivory 15 to 20. You throw in 20 to 25 passes, I think you got a well-balanced offense there. It's just a matter of is Chris Ivory a number 1 running back, and I think he has the talent to be a number 1 running back. He's got to have a solid offensive line ahead of him to open those holes for him, and I think he has good vision to find those holes, and I think he does have the potential to be a 1,000-yard rusher if given the opportunity. When you look at the receiving core, I think this is the other weak spot of the team. Obviously, they brought in Devin Smith, 37th overall pick in the second round. Clearly, if you're drafting a wide receiver with your first or second round pick, it definitely means that's an area of the offense or end of the team that needs an improvement. When you look at the offense, they do have Eric Decker and Brandon Marshall, both veterans though. Brandon Marshall last year, while he was playing with Chicago, had 61 receptions for 721 yards with 8 touchdowns. Eric Decker last year had 74 receptions for 962 yards and 5 touchdowns. They also have Jeremy Curley, who last year had 38 receptions for 409 yards and a touchdown. So we'll see what happens with this team. I definitely think Brandon Marshall is going to be a good veteran for Devin Smith to learn from in his rookie year. I think Eric Decker can be a 1,000-yard receiver. I think he's their number 1 option. Brandon Marshall being a solid number 2, and Devin Smith, I think, as a rookie, will be their number 3 option and possibly down the road become their number 1, number 2 option. When you look at the tight end that they have, They got Amaro and Cumberland, who last year had 38 and 23 receptions respectively for 345 yards and 247 yards. So they don't have a tight end that's going to go out and get you 600-700 yards receiving. They did bring in Kellen Davis, who last year played with Detroit, so a good veteran tight end there. Not a guy who's going to be a receiving tight end for sure for this team. So really, you don't have a receiving option out of your tight end position. And you got Eric Decker, Brandon Marshall, Devin Smith. So I think it's a solid receiving core. But I don't really think if Brandon Marshall, if this was 3-4 years ago, Brandon Marshall, then you pair him with Eric Decker and you have an amazing 1-2 punch. But he is older, but still a good veteran, especially for a guy like Devin Smith, the guy you drafted with the 37th overall pick to learn from. So we'll see what this offense can do. I'm not quite sure they're playoff ready yet. Not quite sure they have the overall talent to get them to the playoffs. But I definitely think they're heading in the right direction. Again, quarterback's still going to be a big question. They took a chance with Bryce Petty with their 4th-round pick, quarterback out of Baylor. I'm not quite sure if he's the answer either. Usually, if you're looking for a franchise change, you're drafting a quarterback with your first-round pick. And their first-round pick, obviously, they drafted Leonard Williams, the defensive end at USC, because they had the 6th overall pick. Unless they were getting that first or second pick, they weren't going to have a chance at Winston or Mariota. So we'll see what happens with that quarterback position. I don't think they've given up on Geno Smith just quite yet, but I definitely think if Geno Smith does get an opportunity to start this year, he's really going to have to show that he's grown and he's improved. If he goes another season where he's throwing a pick for every touchdown he throws, then I wouldn't be surprised if this team ends up with a top 5 pick next year that they draft a quarterback. Those are my thoughts on the offense. Obviously, the offense can be great, but if the defense is poor, then it doesn't matter how many points, how many touchdowns that this offense generates for this team. The defense has to be able to stop the ball. They've drafted, like I said, Leonard Williams with 6th overall pick. They also drafted Lorenzo Mauldin out of Louisville, who's an outside linebacker with the 82nd overall pick in the 3rd round. So those are top 3 picks. Like I said, Bryce Petty was their 4th-round pick, 103rd overall, a quarterback out of Baylor. But definitely Williams and Mauldin, I do think, are going to see a lot of playing time with this team. Generally, a guy you draft top 10, guys you draft in 1st and 2nd round, you're going to expect to have an immediate impact on your team, and I think Leonard Williams will do that for this team. Starting, I'll look at the cornerbacks and the DBs first for the defense. They brought back Darrelle Revis. They brought back Cromartie. Last year, Revis obviously played with New England, had 47 tackles with a couple picks. Cromartie had 43 tackles and 3 interceptions while playing with Arizona. They've also brought in Skrine, not sure how you pronounce his last name. He played with Cleveland last year, had 67 tackles with 4 picks. They also have Milner, who only played 3 games back in 2014, but I definitely think he can have an impact on this team. And then the other couple guys they have are Williams and Walls, who had 36 and 40 tackles respectively, and 3 interceptions between the 2 of those guys. And Williams also only played half a season last year. So I think their cornerback position is solid. I think they've brought back a lot of guys who obviously have had success on other teams and were successful while they were with the Jets. So I think their cornerback position is okay. They're veteran guys, so we'll have to see what happens if they maybe draft a cornerback next year or find one through free agency. I think that's kind of how they solved their cornerback and DB issue this past year, was going through free agency and bringing back guys like Revis and Cromartie. When you look at the safety position, I also think they're okay there. They brought in Gilchrist, who played for San Diego last year, who had 76 tackles with a sack and an interception for them. And they also have Jarrett and Allen, who had 40 and 41 tackles respectively, with two sacks between those 2 guys, as well as a couple picks. So they have guys who are finding a way to get to the quarterback as well, which means their defensive schemes are going to have an interesting look to them. If you have guys who can get sacks from the safety position, it definitely means that they're finding a way to get to the quarterback and have good ball recognition. If they see that it's going to be a play that's taking a long time to develop and they can see a hole to get to that quarterback, then take that opportunity and get to him for sure. But I think their DBs, their safeties, their cornerback position is okay for now. In a couple years, probably gonna have to upgrade those positions because guys are gonna get older, retire, lose a step. So whether they do that through the draft or through free agency, we'll have to wait and see. Linebacker position, I think it's also very solid for this team with Harris, Henderson, and Davis. Henderson in 2013 with Minnesota had 112 tackles and 4 sacks, so hopefully he can get his career going again. Harris and Davis last year combined for 9 sacks, and they each had over 100 tackles, so a very solid linebacking core. And Copels and Pace, who last year had 37 and 40 tackles respectively, with 6.5 sacks and 5 sacks. Very, very solid linebacking core here. You don't have that elite linebacker who's a a guaranteed 10+ sack guy for the season, but I think they have a lot of guys here who can go out and, as a collective unit, have a sack a game kind of thing from just your linebacker position. Then I think when you look at the D-line, they have guys there that can also go out as a collective unit and get a sack a game between Wilkerson, Richardson, and Douzable. They got a solid group there. Harrison is another defensive lineman who had 55 tackles for them last year. Wilkerson, though, 56 tackles with 6 sacks. Richardson had 67 tackles with 8 sacks, and then Douzable had 25 tackles with 2.5 sacks. You add Leonard Williams to that group. I think the defense is solid. I don't think they have that elite player that's going to be a 10, 12 sack player this upcoming season, but I think their defense is a solid group. I think their offense has some talented players in it. I just don't think they have the right guy, whether it be Fitzpatrick or Geno Smith, to lead that team to a successful season and playoff berth. Those are my thoughts on the Jets. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. Either way, feel free to comment. I appreciate the support or the not support. That's what sports talk's all about. So I will be continuing New York week later on. I will be flipping over to a new sport, talking about the NHL team. So look at the Islanders, the Rangers, as well as the New Jersey Devils. Thank you again all for listening and watching. You can follow me on Twitter at GHAM614, and I'll be back later. Bye-bye.